Hey everybody, it's Rob Scheer, the founder of Comfort Cases and the host of Fostering Change. You know what? I want to say thank you and welcome to season 7. Season 7, I can't believe it's here. Do me a big favor. I really want you to listen. I want you to comment, and I definitely want you to subscribe. So I hope you enjoy this season as much as I've enjoyed our guests. Well, you know what? It's another episode of Fostering Change. What a month has this been? Not only did we have our gala, and what a surprise, having close to 250 people singing you happy birthday. What a feeling. Especially for a kid who grew up in the foster care system. Those happy birthdays were far and in between. And I've told the story about, I was 40 years old before I actually had a birthday party, and my husband threw me that party. But then, as we had it, October has been some highs and some very lows. And I think we've seen that throughout our year, and definitely the next couple of years that we had in the past. And I really wanted to have this particular podcast. I'm always upbeat, as you always know that, but I think it's very, very important that we truly talk about, things that are happening, that can really help you grow as well. People look at my life all the time and they're like, oh my gosh, his life is so amazing. He's got some of the greatest kids. Yes, I do have some of the greatest kids, but I will tell you that it has not been an easy road. And I want people to know that. I don't want people to walk in to foster care, into adoption, and not realize some of the things that we go through. And by the way, we go through that whether we adopt, whether we foster, no matter how we have built our family. And when I started thinking about this particular episode, the very first two people that popped into my mind were my friends. You meet people along the road and they become friends, but when you meet friends that truly, are going to be there forever, that they almost become family, that's like my next two guests. They have been on our podcast several times, and they will be on several more times as long as I'm doing this podcast. But Julie and David Bulitt, they actually have brought so much to the table for the Shears, and that's things that you guys don't even realize. But they also have brought so much to the table for couples, for families, how they've grown their families. So, without any further, introduction, because I want to get this conversation started, Julie and David, welcome to Fostering Change again.
Well, thank you for having us. We so appreciate you inviting us on again. We love talking to you in any format.
Well, I will tell you, being the fact that we're both local here, I love the fact when Reece will be at home, and he'll pop me a text message and says, Julie and David are on Fox again. Fox 5, there you are. And we
We're
love
paying the right people there. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yep.
Definitely, definitely. Listen, I want to jump right into this because the things that we're going to be talking about today, is estrangement in families. It actually happens. Ambiguous loss. And I think people, Julie and David, let's talk about ambiguous loss.
Yeah. So I kind of want to start off with telling a little bit of a story that sort of just resonates with me over this whole topic of estrangement. Probably 35 years ago, I was at an event with an agency that I do some work for. It's an adoption agency. And I met a woman that told me that she was an adoptive mom. And I was asking her about her kids. And she said to me, she goes, well, my one daughter's this. And then my son, I don't even know where he is. And this was before I even like had kids. And I thought to myself, how could a mom not know where her child is? How could that possibly ever be? And it sort of struck me. I don't know if I was judgy, but maybe I was a little judgy. Like what happened? Like how could that even happen? And as we share our story today, I still think about that moment where how could a parent, whether adoptive or biological parent, not know, not have a relationship with their child? And so I just wanted to share that a little bit because I think so many people probably have that kind of reaction when they hear our story and other people's stories.
I truly do believe that. And everybody, as you all know, I mean, Julie actually, she lives and breathes the foster adoption world. As a therapist, and David, you as an attorney, the fact is that you've also felt the same thing that Reese and I have felt, and that is that estrangement in families, that loss. And, let's jump right into this, grieving for a child that is there,
Yes.
but they're not there with you.
Right.
Yeah, so just, a little very quick background, and I'm going to move to the grieving piece of things. We, and because we've had discussions over a cocktail or wherever else, we have our two middle girls are adopted, our bookends are biological, and our youngest adopted child had mental health and behavioral issues throughout her life, which peaked. With her almost overdosing and drinking herself to death. And then she bounced from rehab to rehab to rehab. And it got to the point where we thought that we had done everything that we could without digging into all of those things that we did do in terms of financial, in terms of support, in terms of therapeutic interventions and so forth. And it got to the point where I said to Julie, we have a choice at this point to make. And the choice is, since there it doesn't appear that there's anything else that we can do, our choice has to be the good of the one versus the good of the rest of us. And we had three other children that we needed to protect to a certain degree. And certainly people would be critical of us for making that decision. But we ultimately decided that this child, who is now beyond the age of 18, 19 years old, whatever she was at that point, we had to protect the rest of our family and our lives. And so while we made it clear to her that she was no longer really welcome until she could meet some markers or do some things, and she hasn't been able to do that. So that was, I'm trying to think, the last time I've seen her now, probably 15 years.
Yeah.
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 Wow.
Yeah.
That I will tell you, I didn't realize it had been that long. And by the way, I get it all the time, the judgment and stuff, but making that decision, you're making that decision based on three other kids. I mean, Reese and I have been right there with you, having the same situation. The difference is my son was younger, and I am beyond. Every day I pinch myself that we've been able to have that full
Mhm.
circle where, he has been able to do the things that we required him to do. And he has come back into the fold. And, but it's still in the back of your head, if something's going to happen. I am so excited when we have collaborations, when we see that corporations are doing exactly what they should do, and that is to support the foundation of their community. My friends at United Developers Partnership, they are doing exactly that. Listen to this. This is something that I absolutely love because we all need it. Hey, maybe you were involved in some of that hail damage and you need a new roof. Maybe it's time for you to get some new gutters, new siding. Maybe it's time for you to get that dream kitchen that you have always wanted. And also, by the way, if you are someone who has commercial property, let me tell you something. United Developers Partnership, they are the best. And I do mean the best. I have used them. I would never put my name out there, nor our charity, if I didn't know that this was a company that I would stand right next to. So do me a big favor. I want you to go over. You can click right on here, get your free estimate, because guess what? Every time that you get a job done with United Developers Partnership, they actually give to Comfort Cases. They have decided to make sure that 2026 and the last part of 2025, that they are supporting our children who are in our foster care system. So do me a big favor, go support them, because each and every one of us, we want to use companies that give back to our communities and that truly make an impact. So United Developer Partnership, I'm excited to stand next to you. The thing is that knowing that, that they're estranged, what do your kids talk about? Are they in touch with her, or, you know,
Yeah. So the last time David saw her was 15 years ago. I saw her 7 years ago. She had a child, and I went to meet the child who was adopted by a birth cousin of hers. And that's the last time I saw her. And so we've had contact, since then. She would call us every once in a while when she needed, money, or the last time I spoke to her was probably almost a year ago. She called me from a pharmacy asking if I would please pay for her medication, which was a medication that was going to help her stay clean and sober. And I did make that decision.
Right.
David and I talked about it, and I did call my credit card in to the pharmacist, and I wanted her to have that. But I also told her, I said, you can't call every month asking for money. You need to fill out the paperwork so you can get your medical assistance card back. And, I put a boundary on that. So the other kids, we have three other daughters,
Yeah.
and nobody really has contact with her. Our oldest daughter, who was sort of out of the house for a lot of the craziness that was happening, she did try to maintain a relationship with her. And I think that people are like upset and angry at our daughter for some of the things that she can't even help. Like addiction is not a choice. It's something
Right.
that happens. So yeah, nobody really has contact with her. And it feels really hard and really sad. And that's the part of the ambiguous loss, Rob, that you were talking about, which is they're not, deceased. They're not gone forever. We think she's still living. We have not heard otherwise. But it feels like we lost her like a really long time ago. And that loss is never really fully embraced or understood by people.
Right.
I'll hear stories about like somebody's child died or whatever. And I think myself and David and I have talked about it. We feel like we lost a child.
Right.
Yeah, and in answer to your question about, the rest of the family, and we have grandkids now, so there was a lot of different dynamics between our girls. As Julie mentioned, our oldest was pretty much off to college by the time things started getting really difficult. My youngest shared a bathroom with her. My middle child Zoe still carries a lot of, I think, resentment in some ways or concern that we would have thought, and she's Natalie's biological sister, so she has all of those sort of things going on, and we've had to deal with a lot of complexities and a lot of hurt feelings, I think, because what happened with us, and I'm sure that it's happened in your family as well, when there was something acute going on, is that you focus on what the issue is without not as much concern as maybe we should have as parents about what's going on out there in the universe residually with your other children. And I do look back and wish that I'd done a better job trying to keep my eye on the big picture as opposed to just that little sliver of our family.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. The hindsight 2020 is that,
Yeah.
we had been so tunnel vision trying to make sure that this one particular child was receiving everything, and that we did allow some of the kids to just go to the wayside. And now that, we are in a place where now we're all together, now some of the kids are being vocal about, well, you guys had all this time, and I want to jump back to the fact that, with what Julie said about, drug addiction, alcoholism, mental illness. I think, when we adopt, I think that I know for a fact that even if I would have known all the things that our kids had gone through prior to the adoption, I still would have adopted them. Okay. I don't want anybody to not think I would, but I think it would have prepared us a lot more with what we were, because I don't know about your situation, but in our situation, it was almost like a light bulb was turned on and all of a sudden the behavior started. It wasn't that it was like we saw it from the very beginning. It was like overnight, it was a totally different person that living within our house. Did that happen to you all as well, or was it a gradual thing?
I think for us it was more gradual, and I just want to sort of talk about like statistics, not necessarily drug and
Yes.
alcohol
Yes.
addiction, but statistically, 1 in 4 families have some kind of estrangement. whether it's parents deciding kids can no longer be in their life, or oftentimes, and we're seeing a growing trend with kids deciding that parents should not be in their life. So I think it's more common than we know. And I think it's not really talked about. It's not glamorous. Hey, like I don't talk to my parents. Hey, I don't talk to my kid. I don't think people really talk about that. But I think
Do
there
you
are,
hold on, I'm going to cut stop you there for a second.
yeah,
Do you think they don't talk about it because there's a form of shame?
absolutely right. Like just that story that I was telling you in the very beginning when this woman told me she didn't know where her kid was. I couldn't imagine.
Well, I mean, people look at you, and you know that I know you know this. People say would say things. Oh, well, that who are your? Which one is your real daughter? Which one is your real child? And like they're all, they're all real. I've told this story, and it showed up in our first book very briefly. We had neighbors across the street. Their two young kids get hurt in the skiing accident or whatever it was, and they were hurt badly. They were in the hospital, and there was a line of neighbors bringing food, making sure everybody, the families, every afternoon, every over and over and over again. So then you flash forward sometime after that, and our daughter has a big breakdown in the middle of the neighborhood with a million people looking on, gets taken to the hospital. Everybody knows the joke with us, and we try to maintain our sense of humor, is we didn't even get a happy meal. No, no, and nobody's coming over
You, David.
because
Only you.
mental illness
Yeah.
is different thing.
Right, right. Yeah, and mental health and addiction issues when they show up in families are not talked about a lot. And, I'm a clinician, I'm a mental health clinician, and, we're working towards trying to make the conversations more normal, right? Like that we talk about mental health like we would physical health. But I do think that people aren't talking about it. And then statistically, so if 1 out of 4 families are experiencing some kind of estrangement, I would, and I don't have the research out there, but I would also say that adoptive families that have adopted or have kinship care or foster care, even have a higher percentage
Oh,
of
I would bet.
estrangement.
Yeah.
And just as you were saying, I mean, when you adopt kids, whether it's from, foster care or from birth or whatever, there's things that happen. There's issues, there's genetics, there's, feelings and loss and all kinds of things that trauma that make things, even more difficult.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. The thing that, for Reese and I, it really took a toll on our marriage as well. It
Yeah.
really took a toll on our marriage. And I think a lot of that is because of the fact of how different we both grew up. I grew up with the absent, no parents in a system, a statistic, where my husband grew up with his parents, being together for 50 some years. It wasn't even how could you talk to your parent like that? Or what do you mean you didn't make your bed? And so it was for me, it was like me trying to always give our child grace where Reese was more of the no, this is not the way, did you guys experience any of that?
Yes.
In a different way, but yes, very parallel to that. So I'm the divorce lawyer, used to growing up with bullies in the neighborhood. People, when you're a kid, their kids are everywhere. Julie's the mental health person who's always looking for an answer. They're looking for diagnoses, answers, way to fix things. And that generally drilled down to medication. And we had lots and lots of headbutts over, and I suppose I can say this, to me, I would say, yeah, look, she's just an asshole. Okay.
Right.
There's assholes. They are. We grew up with them. That doesn't mean got to shove 12 pills down her throat or keep changing. And Julie was, no, hold on a second. That's not, you're not looking at it in the way that you need to. And ultimately she's right about that. But if you asked us today, we would still disagree. But we
Right.
had that same over and over again. And I would blame her or she would blame
Mhm.
me, and we would bump heads. And it was a very difficult time for us
Yeah.
interpersonally in our relationship. We've talked about that. And it
Yeah.
was also, and it was also, like I said, it was difficult for our other children to manage, I think.
Yeah.
Bec-
Yeah. I mean, I would say looking back, we've been married 39 years, and I would say that raising our kids and specifically dealing with our one child's mental health, addiction, behavioral issues was the most challenging part of our
I
marriage.
mean, Rob, people would have Super Bowl parties, right? Or have events in the neighborhood. We didn't get invited.
That's the same thing happened to us.
Get invited,
Yeah.
so
Or somebody invited you once and then you
yeah,
never
then
got
you get
invited
invited
back.
back because the kid throws
Same
a
thing
rock and
happened
breaks a
to
windshield.
us. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Yeah.
And then, so as you know, I mean, you guys have been part of the journey with Reese and I because you've been so supportive of us. When it was time, when our son came back, and the when we were invited, when he was gone, now we're not any longer.
Yeah.
Mm,
No, and when I've walked through into this with, a clean slate,
hmm
Reese has still have that, wow, I didn't even think about that until you guys brought it up. It's
Yep.
such a
Well,
Yeah.
dynamic.
we got invited once with friends of mine that I've known since high school and their families, and to one of their families' homes, like in the down in the mountains someplace. And it was, we were on edge most of the time, and we were just trying to manage, get our kids through, because we'd really not get invited other places. There was one couple that were friends of ours, and they were kind enough to invite us all the time, but for the most part. So this was a real different thing for us, and things were going kind of okay until a rock went whistling past my ear and broke my friend's windshield because one of my kids got mad at the one, and she flung a rock, and that was it. I said, okay, well, we're not coming back to the farm.
Well, we spent the rest of the weekend looking to
How we could fix the
how
windshield.
to get the
$683, by the way, is
glass
what it cost me.
replaced.
Yeah, I
So
remember.
yeah, but we have a lot. I mean, we have a lot of stories like that.
Yeah.
But here's the other thing that I want to say as somebody that works in the mental health field with a lot of, adoptive families. It's also given me a gift, really. This whole experience of raising a child that's been, neurodiverse with lots of different issues has helped me see that it's not just a matter of kind, firm parenting, right? Like you can do all the things that are supposed to do. And if you have, somebody that has some wiring that's a little bit different or off, it doesn't really matter how you parent. It doesn't matter if you're the best parent, if you have the best techniques, if you're the kindest, firmest, warm, nurturing parent, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I think, I want to jump back to, because I know, gosh, this conversation could last forever. I want to jump back to the medication part of it. What would you suggest to those who are watching and listening when you have a child who refuses medication? They don't want to take medication, but again, they're under the age of 18, but they're refusing the medication. How do you handle something like that?
Well, I think it depends on the diagnosis. I mean, a lot of, kids that are ADHD don't want to take a medication. And I think that that's different than, a child that maybe has bipolar or, something else that's maybe, bigger. If it's causing problems with them in their life in terms of staying at school or being around people and friendships, I think you have to sort of, I mean, you can't force a kid to take medication. You're
Right.
not going to hold a kid down. But if you can kind of see what they're losing and help them see, like you don't, you're having trouble in school, you're having trouble with friends, you're having trouble with relationships. You can't force kids to take medication, and I never advocate for that. I do think there's, liquid medications, which sometimes can be more helpful if kids are averse to swallowing pills. There's patches for ADHD, and there's other medications that might be, tried.
I think that, and this is the lawyer, not the mental health professional, so you can take this for whatever it's worth. But certainly, as you get kids into the teenage years, and we had that issue, it gets
Mhm.
more difficult. But I think that, at least intellectually, if you can bring them into the decision-making process, right? You know, Billy, you're having trouble with this person and this person here in school, and they're here. Why don't we let's get in on this together and see if any of this helps. If
Right.
it doesn't, okay. But if it does, then that's a good thing for you. If you try to engage them, it's like anything else with a kid, right?
Yeah.
If you can engage them in the decision-making
Mhm.
process, if
Yep.
and I know that might be overly optimistic in certain circumstances.
And I think it's particularly important for kids that are, adopted, that have been in foster care,
Yeah.
that, they want to have some control over whatever they can control. Medication is one of those areas, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I agree. I
yeah.
agree 100% on that. And the thing is that, like we have five kids and, they've all been raised the exact same way, given the same things. Reese and I truly do make sure that we set aside individual time but they're very different.
Yeah.
Hmm.
They're very different. And as you said, some are angry, because we opened the door. Some are angry because there was such, the time in that those 3 years that, police were always at the house and, it was a stigma. And I have one particular child who's just like, they're having a really hard time saying that was then, let's focus on
Hmm.
now.
Yeah.
As we close this out, I want both of you to give, what would you tell that parent, those parents who are going through what not only you have gone through, but what we as the Shears have gone through? What would you say to them right now? Because both of you know this. It's a dark time for us.
Yeah.
When we're going through that, we feel very alone. We
Yeah.
feel very judged. We feel, that no one's listening to what we're saying, even though, we've been saying it this over and over again. What would you say to those parents?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, yeah. I mean, I think, for us, we still hold hope, right? As long as we haven't heard the words that our daughter was, has deceased, we hold hope that she's out there and maybe one day she can come back to us. And we're big proponents of repair in relationships. We don't cut people off without, like just forever kind of stuff. We don't hold grudges and, we're open and hopeful. And I think, staying hopeful and staying open, having your heart stay open would be what I would urge parents to do, which is what we're doing.
Yeah, I think that if I had one thing to tell folks who are going through or went through or may go through what we did, and Julie uses this a lot, and I think it's really good advice, which is you do the best you can in the moment. You do the best you can at that time. And there's always going to be second guessing, and there's always going to be, well, if we had only done this, but in the moment, you do the best that you can. And if you've got a partner, if you've got a spouse, work together to do the best that you can at that time. And there's not much more that you can do. And that's what you have to, I think, as a parent going through this, I think you have to lean in on that and say, okay, it's tough. No one gave me a book on how to deal with this,
Exactly.
right? There's not a government pamphlet how to handle.
Right.
So
Exactly.
you do the best that you can, and you got to take some solace in that. That's what I would
Yeah.
tell.
And I'm going to add to that, everyone. Number one, I would say give yourself grace.
Yeah,
Yes.
Self-grace, it's something that Reese and I did not do, but I also will say this, and I've said this many times, get a good therapist.
Yeah.
yeah,
Get a good therapist because and whether the therapist combine, Reese and I truly feel that individual therapy is the best for our relationship. I have my therapist, he has a totally different therapist, and it really works for us. But get a good therapist. Listen, everybody, I know these are tough subjects. I know that some of you are saying, why am we having this conversation? Because we know, as Julie said, 1 in 4 are dealing with what we have dealt with or what we are still dealing with. And the thing I have to say to everyone, and I love the fact, Julie and David, that you said this, is, you know, we all of us fall, and the opportunity to forgive and not hold those grudges and to open up your heart and your door. We're lucky, our son has come back, and we are working as hard as we can to continue to build the relationship. But for those out there that are still, that at that, ambiguous loss or the estrangement in the family, as Julie said, keep up the hope. Keep up the hope because that's all we can do. Everybody, again, another amazing episode. Julie, David, again, as I said, I'm so happy that I feel like your family. Congratulations on your daughter's engagement. You got a marriage coming
yeah,
up
we
real
do. Yes,
soon.
yes.
And
And
guys, we're gonna do this again. So this isn't the
look
last
forward to it.
our friends. I said this to Reese this morning because I was having you guys on. Reese wants to jump on fun on one of these calls and the four of us do one of these because, we love it when we get to have these amazing conversations.
Sure.
Listen, everybody, if there's a conversation that you would like us to have, reach out to us, info@comfortcases.org. Until next time, do not forget, we are days away from National Adoption Awareness Month. That month is so, so important. We see more children adopted in foster care than we see in any other month. But understand that when you adopt for a lifetime, okay? You adopt for a lifetime. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Until next time, have an amazing day and continue to be good humans.